Good morning, and thank you for being here for our worship service this Sunday morning. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day. If it so happens that you're in the position to enjoy that, we wish you the very best of days tomorrow. I suspect most of us will be glued to the television this afternoon. Channel 4 is promising us 6 hours of pre-game football before the football game starts. So if this is your last chance, this is the chance to overindulge in football for one last time this season. By the time the game is over, you will have what? 10 hours. 10 hours of football. That's too much. I'll get off my soapbox now, but thank you for being here. And do have a good rest of the day and a good tomorrow. Let me say before I start also that Mike and Barbara, I truly enjoyed that. Enjoy is not the right word. Appreciated that prayer, as I did Tom's comments before communion. This sermon this morning was begun in early January and was to have been delivered in January, but illness interfered, and so it's today. And so it comes about that on the day before Valentine's Day, I have a sermon about Christian love that I've called the Golden Rule. It's entirely fortuitous that it is being delivered today, but it does seem appropriate for the time. This is not going to be a lecture on the history of the Golden Rule. If you're interested in that, you should start, not finish, but start with the Wikipedia entry online about the Golden Rule. There is an illustrious and extensive history in all cultures about the Golden Rule. It is not unique to Judaism or to Christianity. It is more prominent in Judaism and Christianity, but it is actually present in most cultures of the world, and it does predate the time of Jesus quite considerably, and even the time of Moses. It goes back into ancient Egypt, and it certainly was existing in the time of Confucian China, if you're interested. So, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to be talking about applied Christian faith - the Golden Rule. And the reading for today was Leviticus 19, verse 18. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Leviticus 19:18. This is the writing of Moses. This is part of the Pentateuch, part of the law. Fear and anger intertwine themselves in our hearts. It's always present, fear and anger. And it was present in the life of Jesus. In telling about Jesus cleansing the temple, Mark says the chief priest and the teachers of the law began looking for a way to kill Jesus. And the reason was that they feared him. They feared him. The word used here for fear, translated into English, is a word that means terrify. There's numerous words for fear in the ancient languages, but this particular one has the weight, if you will, of meaning it terrifies a person. But why would they be so fearful? Here was a guy with a piece of rope who waved it around and drove people out of the temple, and they were afraid of him to the point of being terrified. So terrified that they reached an unnecessary conclusion that they had to kill Jesus. Mark chapter 11, verses 15 through 18. Why was that? Anger, similarly to fear, affects our judgment in ways that we reach wrong conclusions and do wrongful things. When the younger son in the parable of the prodigal son returns home, his father throws a big party for him. In the context of the culture, this would mean not just a private little dinner, but they threw it open to the community. This was a big deal. This was New Year's Eve, this was Halloween, this was Christmas Day, all rolled into one. The older son of the two sons does not react well. Starting in Luke 15, verse 28, the older brother became angry and refused to go in. He came in from the field, the party's going on already, he won't go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him, and in that culture, this is an insult to the father. You go into your father. Your father does not come out to you and have to plead with you. You are not showing honor to your father. But the older son says, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, he doesn't even say his brother, but when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. You just can hear the anger surging through him. And it's not said in the Bible that he ever goes into the party. The story that Jesus tells leaves him outside. These are the things that anger and fear can do to us, to affect our judgment, to affect our actions in ways that in a calmer atmosphere we would not wish. But something in each of those stories was a trigger. The priest and the teachers of the law and the older son all violate Leviticus 19:18, and by the way, the 10 Commandments. The priest and the teachers seek to do murder. The older son rejects his father's pleading and thereby dishonors his father. These people's emotions are out of control. Their minds are not with the teaching of the Lord that they claimed to follow. Now, all of us get angry. Paul recognizes this. Ephesians 4:26 says, in your anger, do not sin. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. So, Paul says, you're going to get angry. Every one of you, me, you, everyone, is going to be angry. You're going to blow your gasket sooner or later. But get rid of it. What? Get rid of it. And in Ephesians 4:31, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. And in Colossians 3:8, but now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Anger has to go. Now, the way I read these scriptures, we should recognize, yes, we will become angry. And then we ask ourselves, how will we handle that anger? Well, the first thing that we should avoid is reacting negatively toward the person who made us angry. We don't seek to kill him, as in the case of Jesus. We take whatever action would be necessary to remove those overreactions, to avoid them. It might be communicating with the brother or sister who has offended us. That is, of course, the Christian way. It might require us simply to go into a private place and communicate with God. You know, it's all right to be angry if you're talking to God. The Psalms teach us that. It's all right to be angry, and it's all right to take that anger to God and talk to him about it. That's the one safe place you can take your anger and tell it like it is in private between you and God. But do not act out your anger. James chapter 1, verse 19. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Now, I'm going to say this is a little bit of an autobiographical sermon today, because when I got to this point, I'm thinking, okay, how did I react when I saw that entry on Facebook? I blew my gasket. And so I made a comment on Facebook. I've done this. I'm not pretending. This has been done. And I say things entirely correct as far as the substance goes, I think, but not properly stated in the way it should have been. So get rid of it. Get rid of that anger. It does not produce the righteousness that God requires of us. And what a tall order that is. Do we really have those internal controls that make it possible to put anger away from us? Well, that's exactly what Paul and James is asking us to do. They are asking us to do that, excuse me. And Paul is blunt. Get rid of it. James is blunt. Establish those controls. So how do we begin that process? Every aspect of Christian life begins with Jesus. Let me drive a nail there. Every aspect of Christian life begins with Jesus. You start there, you end there. He is our King. We sing the song, Jesus is our King. Living with Jesus starts with acknowledging that what Jesus said to us and left the record of for us is what's more important than anything else. And Jesus says in Luke 10:27, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. He thereby brings into the New Testament the teaching of Moses in the Pentateuch at Leviticus 19. Love your neighbor as yourself. The two most important laws from the Old Testament and the New Testament are, first, Love the Father, and second, love your neighbor. And Jesus also said in another place, Matthew 7:12, in everything do to others what you would have them do to you. This sums up the law and the prophets. It's not a request. It's not an example. This is a command. This is command language. In everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. This is the golden rule. It is a restatement of love your neighbor as yourself. And in Luke 6:31, do to others as you would have them do to you. Besides the foundational requirement to love God, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 and 5, that's the Shema of the Old Testament. The law of the golden rules is the next most important law. Jesus said that. The two laws were validated by Jesus in the New Testament for us to live by. They remain in effect. And Paul and James continues with their emphasis on the law of love. Let no debt, this is Paul, Romans 13, starting in verse 8. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another, for whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and whatever other command there may be, are summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. Loving our neighbor is a moral obligation that each of us has. And it doesn't require us a genius to know from the New Testament that our neighbors include just about everybody out there. Just about everybody. And he repeats from the Ten Commandments to tell us not to do those things that harm other persons. And he sums it up in Romans chapter 13, verse 10, love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. Now, we can say that love seeks what is good for another person. Or we can say that love avoids doing anything that would harm another person. James puts it out for us, James chapter 2, verse 8. If you really keep the royal law, James's language, the royal law found in Scripture, love your neighbor as yourself, you are doing right. Doing Leviticus 19 is a command in the New Testament. This is the royal law. Why is it royal? It's royal because it comes from the king. It is the law of the kingdom. The law of the kingdom that the poor will inherit. That's right. According to James chapter 2, verse 5, it's the poor that will inherit this kingdom. And he meant poor, people who don't have much. It is the law of the kingdom that the poor will inherit, the royal law. James' emphasis on doing right leads directly to a discussion of Christian ethics. You have to do something, and you have to be doing what helps people. That's James. And I'm tempted to say that James would not define us as spiritual unless he could see that we are busy and that business should be directed to doing right to the poorest among us. That doesn't mean you can mistreat people who are wealthy. It just means that you have to have your focus where it's most needed. Galatians chapter 5, verse 13, you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. Again, for the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. Now, Galatians is about how we are free from the law of the Old Testament. In a long and complicated discussion about the law, Paul reaches back to say that the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. We just read it. We remain under that law even though we are free from the old covenant. We're living under a new covenant. Jesus made this law clear in the Gospels, and Paul and James have made it clear in the letters. The statement is as true for us today as it was when Moses wrote it down in Leviticus. There was an old professor at Abilene Christian College at the time I was there. His name was Robert L. Johnson, Bible professor. And he wrote in his commentary on Galatians these words, and I think they bear repeating. It is interesting that in the midst of all the legal minutiae, in the most legal part of the Old Testament, that is, in the book of Leviticus, one should find the highest principle of Christian ethics: love one another. What we discover is that only the love of God is more important than the law of loving others. And it surely is true that loving God is not possible if we fail to have love for our neighbors. Because if we reject our neighbors, we reject God. You can't do both. I mean, you must have both. You can't do one or the other. To be a follower of God, you have to love God and love your neighbor. So, and Jesus, by the way, did say in Matthew chapter 22, verse 39, that second law is like the first law. The law to love God is like the law to love your neighbor. The law to love your neighbor is like the law to love God. So what's the lesson? What's the application? You know, the idea here is that the Bible should guide us. We should at least try to guide ourselves in the way the Bible speaks to us. Each of us must guard ourselves to ensure we speak and to ensure that we act in love in every decision we make and every action we take. What we do and what we say matters to our Lord, matters to our Father, matters to the Spirit. It matters to one another here in this congregation, and it matters to the people in the world around us. Now, this is a burden. That means, hey, we have to keep this in mind. We actually aren't free to speak our mind by typing in comments on Facebook. It's not a good idea. It's wrong. It shouldn't be done. So it matters. We have a burden to carry. But what did Jesus tell you? It's not a heavy burden. All you got to do is remember, if nothing else, keep your mouth shut. That, or your fingers, back in here. It's not a load that we should refuse. In fact, it's not even a hard load to carry if we just mind our P's and Q's. The burden is light, according to Jesus, and it's not something that we should have to worry ourselves about. We do because we fail every day, but we shouldn't. I would encourage you, as I encourage myself, to keep better control over ourselves as we go through life. The lesson is with you.